It's on. You're live.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to our Policy Review Committee meeting. Today is June 20th at 7 p.m. Present are Connor Kurtz, Chairman, Andrew Basil, Frank Sermonero, and Gary Otto, Superintendent, along with some members of the public. We'll begin with reviewing Policy A004, which is membership, on the agenda. This is a policy we've been looking at for a while now, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Otto to describe.
Well, basically, this is you guys had been kicking this one around. Brian Subers had made a recommendation, if you look at page 3 of 5, to make sure we were consistent with the school code. We've put that language back in. I don't think it's necessary to read it verbatim there. And if you're okay with that, we'll put that back out there as written.
Well, now our determination at the last meeting was to include, I don't know if we want to do a new policy or we want to just add to this policy, the procedure for removing
Correct,
board
that is
member.
in my notes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have any news, any updates on that?
No, what I would prefer that you get a policy passed before we actually, I would recommend that you put together, and you can go one of two ways. We can either take this back for further review and put the process right in here, or do the process via what we call an AR, an administrative regulation.
I think it needs to be clearly laid out in the policy, something we could do, like the teleconferencing policy. We could do policy 004.1. I guess that would be an option, but I think
that would be an option. You could do it either as a policy or an administrative regulation.
I think it needs to be laid out clearly in the policy, because the administrative regulations could be changed. I don't want to say on a whim, but they can be changed.
They need board approval as well. They just come forward in a different process than policies.
I mean, I've got in my notes here, and the two times that we've talked about this, that we're going to include it as part of the policy.
Yeah.
So, I guess my vote would be that it's all on the same. It's all in the same policy. That way, you don't have to go looking for it.
Okay.
Someplace else. I mean, if somebody's going to actually go through that process, it should all be outlined in one place. Otherwise, you may get one thing saying something that's a little bit different than what's in the body of the policy itself. So I think it should all be in one place.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Sermonero. Do you agree? All right. So we're not going to take that policy forward.
Well, we'll expand it.
Yes, we want a process laid out, how to remove a board member, and then we want that to come to this committee to investigate. That's it.
Now, given that this is a board-level policy, do you want me, and I'll say this to the whole committee, to come forward with that process, or do you want to develop it as the board?
I think if you've got
I don't have any at this moment.
Well, then I would ask our attorney to come forward with a recommendation for a process. I know we've got other processes in here for, dismissals and employee issues, and dismissals and complaints. I mean, every single one of our policies has a process for hearings and whatnot. This one should have one as well. And I just call Subers and say, look, this is what we're paying it for. So.
Well, I just wanted to be clear. I'm not so sure as super. I never, dealt with, policy to dismiss a board member, so I would be more comfortable seeking someone's help on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think we should create this thing from scratch. I think we should get a legal counsel involved and have them provide us with a framework or suggestions to see what other school districts are doing. If nobody has a process, I can't believe that, but if nobody does, he's got to be able to write something up.
Okay.
Steal something from somewhere and get a paragraph or two or three written up on what the procedure should be.
So for our next meeting, if you can contact Brian Subers and get him to draft
Can you not
that.
log in, Frank?
No, I can't.
You want to look at? I've got copies of these things.
I can forward you an email. I have it.
That's why I can't get into.
Do you have another email address?
Email for some reason.
Yeah, I tried getting on email today too. I think they're upgrading. They're switching over to the Windows system.
That's right. Outlook, right?
Yes, they are. There is that might be why it is.
Read the hard copies you guys have.
I can certainly lend you mine, except I need to look at mine for my notes. So
That's okay. I can look over Andrew's shoulder.
Okay.
If you have another email address, I can forward it to.
That's
All right.
So on policy 004,
You need to attach these.
the wording is good. Now we need to add the process.
All right. Yes, that's the plan.
Okay.
All right.
Done.
So we're done with 2A.
This is the PDF that's got. I think it's 111 right there.
We're going to move on to 111, vocational technical education. Now, this is a policy Mr. Wolf wanted us to look at.
Yes.
And did you speak with Mr. Wolf to figure out
Yes,
what his
I did,
thoughts were?
and he was happy with the wording that I was able to place in there.
All right.
That you see. We have to remain flexible there. I understand the desire to try to do what the VOTEC wants us to do and make sure kids don't miss their hours, but at the same time, we can't lock ourselves into saying we're definitely going to arrive at a certain time every day. So this forces at minimum for the principal, when they build the high school schedule, to try to make it as user-friendly as possible, and on a kid-by-kid basis try to get them out the door as soon as we can to get them to the VOTEC, because that's generally what the problem is. It's just the travel time boon so far from the tech schools that there's nothing we can't cut them out of their, because what happens with a VOTEC kid is their classes are so compact anyway. They really don't get a lot of electives. They're taking math, reading, social studies, science, or math, English, social studies, science, and then they're out to the VOTEC, so they don't get a lot of room in their schedule, so we can't really let them go early because they're not in an elective where you might say, well, you can miss part of this class or part of that class. Mm-hmm. So,
can you walk us through any? I know there's a lot of wording changes in here, things from shall to may, stuff like that. Can you run us through any substantial changes?
That's the one. We added number 7 on page 3 of 4.
It says what?
Which says now the district will take. This is the only change from before, because this is at a second reading level.
Okay.
So all of these other changes had been there. Number 7 on page 3 of 4, the district will take into consideration any scheduling requests of the VOTEC school when developing the annual master schedule of classes. So that's how we're going to try to cooperate with them.
And Mike Wolf felt comfortable with that?
Yes, I called him today, and I read him verbatim what that said.
All right. I guess any more discussion on policy 111?
No, I mean, I think if he's satisfied,
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah, this is at a second reading. This is just so that Monday when we look at it, it's okay to go. This has already been in front of you for 2 months.
All right. Moving on to 2C, policy 112, homebound instruction.
That was some minor edits there in terms of adding on page 1. If you look at the words, the letters in light print, we're saying that all of those conditions had to be satisfied for homebound instruction. This is a prescribed policy from the state. We're just following state procedures here. Most of this is right from the school code in terms of what we do for homebound instruction.
All right.
It's just that the state recommends that you have your own policy, even though it is in the school code.
And I didn't mention at the beginning, if there's any interaction from the public, feel free to raise your hand.
I don't think these are the policies in front of them, so I'm not sure how they're going to...
Well, if they have any comments, I guess, on the topic we're talking about. All right. Any comments from 112 from the committee? All right. 2D, 114, extracurricular, co-curricular athletic.
The major change here was a request from the board to strike that phrase, any extracurricular activity shall be considered to be under the sponsorship of the board, etc., on page 2 of 3.
Yep.
All right.
And that was it. That was all that needed to be done for that policy.
All right. Policy 115, interscholastic activities.
Yeah, this is a rather important change that I still wouldn't recommend taking forward, but we did make the wording change. We might have time to take it forward by the time the next board meeting that we would look at this rolls around. But if you look at, and Andrew, I think you were the one that brought this up under the guidelines on page 5 of 6, males participating on certain female teams. The phrase was there, if you're following me, due to the fact that the physical size, speed, and power of male athletes would create a hazard to the health and safety of female participants, we are going to prohibit male participation on those teams: girls field hockey, girls volleyball, softball, and girls soccer. And then we added a statement for the vice versa. That hadn't been there. Due to the nature of competition in certain male sports, the Daniel Boone Area School District prohibits female competition in the following male sports, and they're listed accordingly: boys volleyball, baseball, boys soccer, boys lacrosse, boys basketball, and wrestling.
That was 115, right?
Yes. Now, I did want to forward this off. I have forwarded this off to Subers based on that change, just to make sure there are no Title IX issues. I had our athletic facilitator call PIAA, and surprisingly, PIAA's mum on the issue. They say you need to kind of deal with it as a local policy matter. So
yeah, my concern was, you're starting to see some girls on football teams,
absolutely,
and stuff like that, and then I've heard boys competing on field hockey teams. And, if we're going to sit there and say, well, look, we're worried about this being an issue of of boys overpowering girls, and we need to make sure we're even-handed on both sides.
I'm just not ready to bring it forward unless if August is when we're going to do this, then we have plenty of time. It's certainly not going to be ready for Monday to put out there for a first reading.
And did you say Supers approved this? Or?
No, I'm asking him to take a look at that for Title IX issues, because in our research of it with PIAA, they don't. Well, I thought they might have wording that we could borrow. They just don't.
Yeah.
So they do allow it, but we can prohibit it.
Absolutely. The PIAA allows it. That's how they have the one girl who's on the boys wrestling team, which I think is appalling.
Yeah, that's been happened more than once.
I think, but the PIAA they do allow it.
I just want to make sure that we don't get a Title IX challenge should we say you can't do this.
I think the only challenge would be is lacrosse.
Right. Right.
All right.
So that, I think, wraps up the rest of those other changes.
I had a question
go ahead.
that I wanted to know. It says, I have to find it here, something about a code of conduct, athlete conduct. I'm trying to figure out what page it's on.
I think it was in the...
yeah, there it is.
It references a code of conduct.
Yes, page 3 or 2. Page...
I think it's at the bottom of page 2, or the top of page 2, the bottom of page 2.
I'm looking at the document, the Word document. It doesn't have the pages.
2, I think.
All right, here it is.
All
athletes are required to comply with the athlete's code of responsibility. When I was campaigning, a few parents asked me if there was a coach's code of responsibility, because there were some complaints about coaches and what they were doing with some of the athletes, not what they were doing, but how they were speaking to the athletes, and some of the, I heard cursing was taking place at practices. I was wondering if there's such a thing as a coach's code of responsibility.
Not one that we have written up. Doesn't mean you can't have one.
Under the employee code of responsibility or code of conduct, because they're employees of the school.
Right. That's. I mean, if you want to formalize something like that, we could certainly move forward with it. But I agree.
Positive. Anne Marie had forwarded to me the employee code of conduct or whatever it was that applies to. I believe it's teachers, but every.
It applies to everybody.
And it says no foul language and all that kind of stuff in there. So
is that policy, or is that something like a teacher would get upon their?
It's part of their employment contract.
It's part of your. Let me put it to you this way: it's part of not formalized written policy, but it's a written procedure that we have that you're supposed to follow.
Yeah, I understand. Do our coaches have access to this? Are we giving this to our coaches when they join Daniel Boone?
I can't answer that. I honestly don't know.
I think maybe that's something we should do, because there should be responsibility across the board, not only students but coaches.
Well, I think there's an expectation that they, as an employee, there's a bar for everybody to follow. No matter who's under that bar, they're supposed to behave this way.
I just want to make sure they know what the bar is, and if there is an issue in the future, we can come back and say, listen, you knew what the rules were, you broke the rules, these are the consequences. I think we need to be clear at a district level with that. I'll throw that out to the committee. I think that would be something. I don't know if we want a policy, but I think there needs to be, or if it is in the employee contract or wherever it is, I think we need to give that, or maybe not even alter it, but gear it toward coaches as well. And not just coaches, but all extracurricular advisors.
Well, let me first of all find out what the athletic facilitator and the principals already do.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In terms of what the coaches receive, in terms of a heads up or what their orientation is to becoming a coach. So,
I'd be interested in hearing about that. I think that's a good idea. And then from there, we can determine if we need policy, if they're not given anything about conduct.
Well, I think the question is what orientation are coaches receiving?
Where is the athletic code of conduct? The handbook?
I was wondering that too. I called you. You were out of the office at that time, but I was wondering if we had that on file, what the PIAA Code of Conduct is.
I can check that. I do believe we have a written document that the kids get, but I can double check that. I'm not sure. I honestly don't know that.
I think some of the individual coaches have them sign something.
Hello.
Hey.
I don't know.
201, it isn't on the agenda, no.
So it'll be next school year then?
Policy 201's already been approved, I think.
What, can you tell me what policy 201?
Yeah, that's the one for admission to kindergarten testing.
We did that at the last meeting.
Oh, because I heard the curriculum meeting, and then there was another voting meeting since then, you mean?
And we approved it.
We approved the edits.
The board meeting was voted on and approved.
Okay, with the outside school psychologists?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so that starts effective not this school year, but the following one?
I believe
It starts this coming school year.
So if we want to get her tested by an outside psychologist for this coming school year, we can do that? Yes?
you said
Yeah, I mean, the policy's online at this
Okay.
point, so you should be able to just pull that up off the website and
Okay.
review it. And if you have any questions, I guess you call.
Just call me tomorrow. I mean, I'm not sure who you are, so just.
Weren't you grandfathered in?
We were, and there's a whole other story around that. So that's why I want to know if we can have an outside counselor do it. So
We always have that. I mean, the way it's written, I think that was always an outside option, but I think we did I don't know you, so I don't know who was here. I missed that meeting, frankly, that curriculum meeting. So
okay. So I can just go online and see the new policy.
it should be up there. Was it uploaded? Because there was an issue.
That I don't know.
I'll check right now if it was uploaded for you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's nice and cool in here.
She's Miss Folker. Dr.
Oh, okay.
You met her husband.
Okay.
Policies and guidelines. 201, you said?
Yeah, I think it's 201.1 or 2.
School age defined. Is that what the title of the policy is? Because it says here last review date is 6/24/2002, so it wasn't
That
uploaded
wasn't
yet.
uploaded yet. It was just passed.
Should I just give you my email address to email it, or for your secretary?
Can we have that uploaded tomorrow, right away?
There's a lot going on with this whole website, so I don't know the answer
I'll
to
just
that.
give you my email address, and that way, if she can email it to me,
That can be done.
that would be great.
Is there a hard copy stored in here somewhere? Because we could access now to show her?
No, I don't.
I got a hard copy laying around here of that
All right.
policy.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go back and we're going to ask about the orientation process for new coaches. And I would expand it not just to coaches, but also to other extracurriculars. Club advisors.
Well, you're getting beyond this policy now when you're talking about that. So just this policy deals with interscholastic athletics.
Okay, maybe we need a new policy then for all behavior. Well, no, it's included in our employee. We're all employees.
You're going on my memory of reading that thing like 9 months ago, but my recollection was it specifically talks about the conduct of employees of the school district and how they're supposed to be behaving themselves and how they interact with the students and so on and so forth.
There's a professional code of ethics that all educators have to follow.
Exactly. And if they're considered now employees, because we've now defined as part
You're
of
quite
our
welcome.
policies,
Thanks, you too.
volunteers, coaches, and so on and so forth, as employees
Is
of
it-
the school district.
Is it this computer or this name here,
No,
Nancy?
It's just computer 221.
Compute. Okay.
Then,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That would apply to everybody. I guess the second step now is, are the people that are taking these positions being provided with a copy of that thing as part of their orientation, even if they've been a coach in previous years? Is this being handed to them every year?
I mean, we can-
sign off on it every year. Who's signing these things?
Just as brainstorming, we could probably develop a sign-off that says you've received the packet of information that says the following.
And you agree to the terms.
Well, I don't. Whether they agree to them or not, the terms are in effect. It's signing is saying you've gotten this. You've been given due process.
how many athletics? Doesn't matter how many years you coach. Every year you got to go out and you got to sign all the paperwork. So
Right.
You're not going to do certain things.
Right.
And you are going to do certain things. So, at the very least, we should have the same sort of process here. And I would imagine same thing with this athletic code of conduct. I don't know where it is. How do the kids get it? How do the parents get a hold of it? We should probably have it posted on the website somewhere, and the kids should be signing off on it before they even play in any kind of sport.
That stuff may happen. I honestly do not know. If Goose were here, she could probably speak to that. Do you have athletes?
When she played middle school, we didn't sign anything. She played high school volleyball, and the coach had all the girls sign up per expectations. Don't be late, that
Right.
kind of stuff. But it wasn't a code of conduct from the school district.
Mm-hmm.
It was an official school district form.
So I think that's something we need to do. We have to have a code of conduct for the
Well,
students.
my assumption is if it's here in this policy, we already have something like that, so that's just an investigatory matter.
All right, so we have to figure out what that is. The athletic code of conduct. And then that, I guess, that was a change from when we made all of the volunteers technically employees. So we need to make sure they're given that material that employees typically get upon
Right.
their induction to the school district. So that's just a administrative thing that needs
Yep.
to happen.
Absolutely.
And if you can forward this committee, that to the employee code of conduct, I'd appreciate it. Can that be done?
The professional code of ethics?
Whatever's included. Okay. Yeah, whatever the employees are given when they sign up to work with the district that governs how they need to behave, what the expectations are. Is that the code of ethics? Then the code of ethics.
I don't think it's a bad idea, actually, that becomes a policy. Just, I know it's duplicative, but
It would be good for the public to see too
there,
on the website. Yeah.
Because how often do you read your employee agreement, other than the day you get hired?
Now, if we were to make that into a policy, would it be? Is it already almost in policy form? Like not set up like a policy on paper, but is it pretty much a policy? Just kind of.
Well, there's actually a prescribed document that is issued by the Pennsylvania Department of Education that all educators have to adhere to. So I wouldn't suggest that you have to make any revisions to it. I'd have to look at it, and that's beyond the scope of this policy. I mean, you're getting into a different area here when you're talking about
Code
that.
of professional ethics. This says professional conduct defines interactions between the individual educator and students, employing agencies, and other professionals. It's for certified educators as required by statute, so on and so forth. So it's not clear to me this applies to
Yeah.
everybody.
We could adapt it though and make it apply to everybody in the form of a policy.
You can pull that out and turn that into a policy.
Yeah.
This just refers to professional educators.
All right. We should.
Any employee of the district.
All right. That's
or
something.
School board members or anything.
Yeah. I think that's something we need to do. We need to take that code of ethics and we need to turn it into a policy, not just for educators, but for volunteers, coaches, for educators, for everyone. So for our next meeting, if we can have that.
Yeah, I would agree.
We can call it the employee code of ethics policy, something like that, whatever.
Where does that go? Does that go in the 100s or where does it go, Dr.
No, 100s are student programs.
Well, it does say here in this policy at 115.
It's probably
Coaches
3,
are-
4, 500 where you go into
There's an
classified,
athletic coaches
professional,
code
and
listed here. It says
administrative.
coaches are expected to exhibit habits of dress and personal grooming, which will serve as a positive.
Where's that,
example.
Andrew?
It's on
15?
page 5, top of page 5.
Of the policy?
It says the use of tobacco products, controlled substances, and alcohol while coaching or supervising a team is prohibited. All language, both verbal and nonverbal, is
See, I think we have a lot of
to
that
be
stuff.
appropriate at all times. Foul or demeaning language is not acceptable.
Is that our document?
Yeah,
That's 115.
that's in the policy.
Oh,
Appointments to these positions yielding extra pay are on an annual basis and are arranged for on an individual
I
basis.
think it's covered, Connor.
All right. Does that cover everything then?
Well,
It covers coaches
talking about the coaches.
Yeah.
you know?
All right. Can we expand that to?
That would have to be a different policy.
Oh, it has to be a different policy.
Yeah, I think so.
I still think that would be helpful, not just coaches, but and what I was
I
asking.
think it rubs the issue. I mean, we got to make sure all volunteers and advisors and everybody else who's not quote unquote a professional educator somehow being covered in our policies for appropriate behavior and how they're interacting with the students. So, this touches on it here, and I think it kind of covers the concern you raised, but
Yeah.
there may be other issues that this doesn't cover that, a review of the professional code of conduct may reveal. So I think it's worthwhile for us to take a look at that.
All right.
and really that language, because of the way you see that, that we added that. That's new. That's what we're looking to expand into this.
Something I would just like to have investigated, when we go back to look at the employee code of conduct, I want to make sure everything in there is also listed here. Like, we're not missing something.
Well, you have to be careful because there are certain things that teachers are responsible for doing in terms of lesson planning and this, that, and the other thing that have nothing to do
Well,
with
I don't mean
coach.
that. I mean the behavior-wise. Like, it does mention here you can't use tobacco products, etc. But are there things along those lines that are in the employee handbook that are not listed here? You know what I'm saying?
There may not be because they don't apply to coaches. There just may be some things that are in there that just, they don't match. There's not a one-to-one correspondence.
I understand that. I'm talking more about behavior. Never mind. I'll take a look at, when we get the employee code of ethics,
Okay.
I'll take a look at it because that's not what I mean. Do we have anything else in this policy? All right.
Connor, before you move on, and I don't know if it applies to this policy or if it's even something you want to consider, I had contacted Michelle because we're developing a heat policy for the AC to see what Boone's was to steal it, and you guys don't have one. A heat policy for the athletes to be outside.
I brought this up when we were talking about I brought this up at one of the board meetings when we were talking about the temperatures on the turf. And how hot
Oh, a heat policy.
Heat policy.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Temperatures on the turf that you put down get extraordinarily hotter than if you were playing on grass.
Yeah, I don't remember this coming up.
There was, about a year ago, I believe.
I remember it.
We were talking about, because football players are passing out at certain universities and all kinds of places.
Not just football, but any cross country.
Yeah, even I know marching bands sometimes run a parking lot.
Have a heat policy, and the other thing that the
I'm sure we can get something on that.
Is a sudden cardiac arrest policy.
That's new too. Yeah, there's just a law passed about cardiac arrest, making sure.
Arrest in athletes. That has to be that all schools have to adopt a policy with regards to that.
Give me an example of what we would tell somebody to do in the policy.
Well, what the law states is that your athletic department needs to be trained.
That's what it would be.
To look
How to
and see
handle
and
that.
discover the symptoms, signs and symptoms of sudden cardiac arrest, dizziness, that.
I think it's similar to the concussive policy that Mr. Wolf brought up at our last board meeting.
Right.
I know there's just.
So are they saying, does the law say that we need to keep people trained?
I don't know a lot about that.
Brand new.
I'd have to do some research on that.
So we're just.
I think that's a great idea. I don't have background on
It's
it.
in the PASBA bulletin on the first few pages.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So just take a look at that.
I wish I had time to read that bulletin.
I just looked over. It was on the first, within the first 5 pages. It told you this is what you need to do.
Okay,
So
well, we'll take a look at that, and we'll come back in
Hopefully
August
that'll
with
be
that.
helpful. Hopefully that helps to justify the cost of the membership in that group. So we have to look a heat policy. I think that's something we could investigate.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I have them in my notes.
So we're gonna.
It's on record here.
All right.
And I could do
We'll be more than happy.
Absolutely.
Anything else on interscholastic athletics? All right. Moving on to policy 116, summer school.
Again, these are just edits to bring it up to speed.
Is this mandated by law?
Summer schools?
Yeah.
No.
Just simple words like in under 2 authority, line 10, it says the board will as opposed to may. Mm-hmm. I tend to be careful when it says shall and will as opposed to may and might. That sort of takes your option away, and it becomes a dictate or a mandate of the school district.
No, you have absolutely no affirmative mandate in the law to run a summer school.
Okay. Well,
if our kids don't get credit for classes, we can tell them to go over to Exeter and get it, and then we can count Exeter as credit, or we can tell them to go over to O&J. There have been in the past, I can't say I know where, but I know there are some schools that didn't run summer school programs.
Okay, I think we should change will to shall if we don't need to offer
shall.
it.
Yeah.
Or may.
Yeah.
I'm noticing on the edge here it has, in reference, it does cite a statute. Is that, I'm not sure, if we are not statutorily required to
No,
provide,
statute 502.
I'm talking about statute 1901.
I don't know the exact, my guess is that that's one of those statutes that says you have the authority to do if you so choose.
Okay. Like, I just want to make sure are we still going through all that when reviewing? We're making sure that the law fits with what the changes are?
Yes.
That's something that's still being done?
Yes.
All right.
The reason, as a matter of fact, there should be a strike through the 5.9 on the second page.
Title 22.
No, on the second page.
Well, I'm seeing one on the first page, too, here.
Yeah, well, there's one on the second page that didn't get stricken.
All right.
I think with that I agree with Andrew, should you decide at some point
Not to
you don't want to do it, that word has a lot of power there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if you see above in the very first sentence, it kind of already says that.
Yeah, I know, but down below it's saying now you will provide all these things.
Right.
I was looking at equipment and books and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, do we have to provide it, or can we have somebody buy it if they're participating? And they
You
pay
could.
for it? So,
This is one of those policies where you have local discretion.
well, that's what I'm
Well, that's
saying.
what we
Will
need to-
says
yeah.
we're going to do it. May says we might do it, or we might have somebody else do it. So,
Keep our options open.
yeah, I'd rather keep our options open than paint us into a corner. Okay.
Yep. Anything else on that policy? All right, let's move on to 117, class size.
Just some wording changes. Again, class size is a totally discretionary policy for the board. If you notice, the only school code site is Section 510. Section 510 basically of the school code says school districts can promulgate all necessary regulations to run its school district. So that's the only legal citation that you need there. Anything you do here is totally up to you and your discretion.
Does this number 10 box us in the corner? If there's 10, we have to provide it, or is it?
No.
Or for a course to be offered, it
Right.
doesn't say that we will offer it. It just says you have to have a minimum of 10 for it to be a possibility.
And then it has in there that you authorize me to make exceptions.
That's the way that reads, it's exactly.
Yeah. Under guidelines, Dr. Allen, number 3 guidelines.
Yeah, go ahead.
It just, instead of saying 10 students must be enrolled, it says minimum of 10 students must be enrolled.
It means the
Oh,
same
yeah,
thing.
I agree. That makes sense.
The intent is the same.
'Cause it could
it's
be
just this
more.
wording. Yeah. These are some pretty small class sizes if we're limited to 10 per class.
I would say to leave, not that I'm looking for power, I'm just saying leave my discretion in there if you have less than 10 and you get into some of these high-level AP courses where you really do want to, afford the opportunity to do it. I would certainly inform you to say, dear board, there are 2 classes at the high school that are enrolled with less than 10. Here they are, and here's what they are.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm even thinking, even if you had 12 kids enrolled in a class, but it's a prohibitively expensive class to have, it may not be worth it for only 12 students, whereas it might be worth it if you had 22.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so long as we as a board have the discretion to be able to say, well, look, okay, granted, you needed at least a minimum of 12 for this to be an option, but quite frankly, I don't know what kind of course this would be, a lab or something else
Right.
where it's heavily involved, there's a lot of man hours and there's equipment or something else that you say, look, this is just really too expensive to run for 12 kids. There's got to be financial considerations as well as academic ones, I would think, particularly where we are now in our budget. That would be my only concern with this class size, is that we're not going to say, okay, just because 10 people sign up that we have to provide it. It's still our option.
How could we word that?
Well, I don't think it's worded in a way that it does box us in the corner. It says it shall be determined by the board after consultation with the superintendent and principal.
Right.
It's just saying that there's a minimum.
This is one of those
requirement
policies that it really functions as more of a guideline
Yeah.
than a steadfast, this is the way it's going to be, because you ultimately, because you don't have any other statutory requirement other than this is a rule you can make up, you can pretty much do what you want.
The only other thing, I don't know whether we want to, I really don't want to get into the micromanagement of this, but I'll have to say that in the 4 years that I was on the board before the budget, or actually 3 years before I was on the board before the budget became a problem, we never saw what the class sizes were, ever. It just wasn't brought to our attention. It wasn't until year 4 we had a budget problem that we were, the question came up, well, what are our class sizes? Mm-hmm. Are we offering classes that, we shouldn't be offering? Are there places where we can cut or consolidate? Instead of having 2 classes of 9, can you get one of 18? That sort of thing came up in the discussion. And it wasn't until then where we provided with a list of class sizes at the high school. So
it will be an even bigger conversation next year, guaranteed.
Yeah, so I don't know whether this is, look, I don't want to have in the policy something that says each year the board will be provided with a list of class sizes, but I don't know if in part of the policy we need to have in here there should be some sort of administrative review of class size.
Just put a sentence in that says the superintendent and appropriate building principals will annually review class sizes and report them to the board. I mean, it's that simple. Just make it part of our routine, where in a curriculum instruction meeting every August we report out, here's the students' enrollment, here are the class sizes. We can give you, just how we give you one in elementary, that we always do that in elementary. You always know how many kids are in 4th grade. But at the high school, the matrix is a little different. You have 75 to 100 course offerings, so the spreadsheet's a little longer. But the board certainly can be made, that information can be readily made accessible. It's on a spreadsheet. It's a rather, it looks like a budget sheet.
I know exactly what it looks like. Yeah.
So it's just your course, you call it your course tallies. I mean, it's not hard information to get.
So we just want to make sure the administration is reviewing that on a yearly basis, and that is communicated to the board.
I think it needs to be published to the board.
Okay.
I think we need to be seeing that.
I'm fine.
Because unless we know to ask, look, you're going to get new board members on here every 2 years or whatever it is, and quite frankly, people aren't going to know to ask the question. So if stuff is being provided to them, as a requirement, at least they have an opportunity to say, okay, well, what is this? And look at it, have it explained to them, and they can start asking questions about it.
I honestly think we as an administration should be reporting that to you, not just elementary. It should be K to 12.
Yeah. Let's just put it in a policy saying, once a year, the administration will review and report to the board. When we talk about the academic or the athletic calendar being published to the board, I would think class size would be just as important.
All right, I have a note here. I'll work on the wording. I just have here an annual report to the board on K to 12 class sizes.
When I read this year, the superintendent is authorized to approve exceptions to this guideline on a case-by-case basis with board approval. I thought if the class had like 8 students, but it's also if the class has 14 students, it could still be eliminated if the superintendent and board think that's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Like you said,
okay.
We're so conscious of the budgetary issues these days. I think it's.
You should do that even annually, whether you have budget issues or not. You should know the amount of kids enrolled. I mean, not that colleges are the same, but colleges look at their enrollment in their classes, and I'm sure report to their board of directors about how many students are signing up for class X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So, and it's not burdensome to give you that information. I mean, it's not like this is data mining. It's right there.
Yeah. I actually think it would be helpful. As a board member to hear that.
Well, you could be instructed to the public as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of the public doesn't realize that, but actually it shows you, the breadth of the curriculum. It makes you put everything on a piece of paper that's readily accessible. I think it's good information.
All right. Do we have any other comments on policy 117? All right, let's move on to agenda item 3, new policy discussion, policy 829, staff-student communication.
Well, given the world we live in, we are recommending to bring forward, it seems to be the trend in some other districts. We, quite frankly, borrowed this from Exeter. Fleetwood has one that's very similar, and you're starting to see districts go this way about putting some specific do's and don'ts as far as Facebooking, MySpacing, all that kind of stuff.
I think.
So this is all brand new.
Yeah, I mean, my first review of this thing was, I'm glad we see a policy addressing this, because before there was none. And my concern was when we were on the the activity fee committee, and we were discussing rosters, and I was trying to get up rosters of who was in band and who was in playing sports and all that kind of stuff. So we could make a head count. one of the things that was forwarded to me, even though I didn't ask for it, I was just looking for numbers, not names. And I got a list that had students' names, cell phone numbers of the students, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of surprised me that a coach or somebody would have the cell phone numbers of students. And not that anything nefarious was going on with it.
Understood, but
at the same time, it opens a door that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be there, and provides access. And the first thing that popped in my head is I wouldn't want a coach calling my kid on their cell phone without me knowing about it, and on a daily basis. I mean, the coach should be calling me, not my kid, and whatever it is, whether it's a club advisor
right.
or it's a and maybe I'm just old-fashioned.
No,
I had cell phones when I was in college.
I don't think it's appropriate.
But kids are walking around with cell phones all over the place now. Maybe that's the norm. I don't know. I just think that if you get the wrong, you have a bad apple. That bad apple now has access to kids without the parent being a filter or something else. You're opening up that direct line of communication, and it just, I think, opens a Pandora's box for liability and risk to the student that otherwise would not have been there. So.
The not to be poetic, but the streets are littered with these problems because certain places don't look at them. And I think this is the first step to trying to...
Well, even this policy says there won't be inappropriate communication. It doesn't say that you won't communicate
right.
with these students one-on-one
right.
in that fashion. So,
and I don't know how realistic that is. Pink elephant in the room here with this policy. I mean, you need under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need something that says, under no circumstances will employees engage in romantic relationships with students.
I think that might be mentioned in one of our policies, but it should be mentioned in here too.
But you've got you're circling around the issue, but.
I mean, you're the parent of a couple. I mean, would you care if a coach or a band director or a club advisor was calling your kid and setting up appointments for games or what time you're showing up and where are you? I mean, or would you as a parent want him calling me as a parent saying, okay, look, I'm trying to get your kid from here for this or that or the other thing? I don't know. I mean, my kids aren't of that age. I don't know if I'd want those conversations going on between my kid and a coach without me knowing that conversation even took place.
It's so hard. It's so hard to say because it depends on the nature of what the conversation is. I mean, a coach, whether it's a coach or band director or whatever, they're communicating constantly with the kids, and the cell phone is just another medium to do that if it's necessary. But it's when it gets into things that are unnecessary. So it's hard to say. I wouldn't, my kid is in band, for example, and he's an older student. He's a senior now. So, for Mr. McAdams to say, hey, Frank, do this, do that, do the other thing, and maybe if he forgot something, not that he ever did, but if he forgot something, he called him and said, hey, do this. I mean, I don't really have an issue with that. But where's the line? Where do you draw the line?
I agree with Mr. Sermonero. I actually, a few years ago, I was in a leadership position of an organization in the high school, and I had the cell phone number of the advisor, and I would call, like, for example, if we were locked out of the building and we had to bring something in, I would call, somebody would come open the door. Something like that I think is all right. However, if entire teams are sports teams or whatever, if they're all giving their phone numbers to the coaches and they're just routinely calling back and forth, like a one-time or two-time thing, I can understand. But if this is routine and it becomes normal, if there's a sense of normalcy in all this, what I would suggest, maybe what we could do is to have the policy, communication is not allowed with the cell phones with students unless the building principal approves. I
think you're going to have a nightmare.
No?
You're going to have a management nightmare with 1,200
well, I mean, no, not if it's entire teams.
I think if you err on this side by saying, don't do it.
I mean, I think it's one thing if somebody, students and teachers, they email each other about work assignments or stuff like that. I mean, I get that, all right? And quite frankly, when you get into your senior years in high school, you get to the collegiate level, that happens at a much higher level. So,
there's actually online classes.
Yeah, well, I understand that. So, but I think my concern is, at least there, if it's an email format, it's being captured somewhere.
By the institution.
By the institution, or the Google or whoever it is that's out there. They can grab that email at any time under court order or anything else to say, okay, what actually transpired here between these two people? Same thing with texts. But when someone's on the phone with somebody else, there's no control over what's being said between two people, and it just gives me pause. And I don't know how you control it. I don't know whether you say there's no phone communication at all between staff and whatever, or and that's where you draw the line in the sand and people just work around it. Somehow we managed to communicate before cell phones, and all was okay. I granted it makes people more accessible, but I'd be a little nervous if my kid was getting a call at 9:30 at night by a teacher or a coach or somebody else, and I'm not aware of it. They're up in their bedroom or who knows where.
Yeah, this is a confusing policy because it's strictly, I'm thinking more broad, but this is strictly about communication. Staff communication, and the limits to that.
Should make it student-staff relations.
I don't disagree with you, but I think you got to start. It all starts with a communication.
Look, I think it's good we got the policy out here to look at. I'm not ready to endorse it, obviously.
Yeah.
What my first blush and my first concern was, it's addressing that there's not going to be inappropriate sort of interaction between the two on these forums. I'm wondering if the forum should even be available. Should you just be saying, I get it, emails and text, but is it appropriate for a teacher to be talking to a 9th grader, or is it appropriate for a teacher to be talking to a senior versus one of these forums? I mean, should age be a consideration, or should it not be a consideration at all? So you can have a teacher calling an elementary kid or a middle schooler.
With all the legal issues in the world now involving all this stuff, a conversation over the phone could not be verified. The student could make something up. The teacher could make something up. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to create a burden for the people involved in these activities, but if it comes down to it, if we have to ban cell phone communication between employees and students in the interest of safety, I think that's something that we should do.
Yeah, that's what I meant earlier when I said error on that side.
Yeah.
If you're going to err on this policy.
As a parent, if my daughter got a call from a coach, male or female, I'd be like, why are they calling you? It would bother me, I have to say.
I mean, whatever they have to say, couldn't they say it to the parent?
Why are they calling you?
Yeah.
You're a child. Call the parent. I mean.
I coached for. I can tell you, just when I look at this, I mean, times have changed. I'm old school, but I coached wrestling for 12 years. I never, in my 12 years of coaching, ever had to make a telephone communication to one of my athletes. Just didn't need to do it.
They didn't have cell phones back then.
But we had a landline, but we didn't. But we just didn't.
Phones were that big.
There was just no need. I can't even today fathom why does a coach need to be communicating with athletes on the phone. I don't understand that.
It's
there
just
are practice.
It's an inconvenience to do it.
Well, it's the world of convenience has met the legal world here, and that's the whole point with this policy.
Well, I think there's that. Plus, when I was given that list, how many other coaches have lists? And then what happens with these numbers? I mean, now somebody gets their hands on this list somehow who isn't authorized to have the list to begin with, and now Joe Schmo has a list of 100 girls athletes' cell phones, for crying out loud, and it's opening up a whole Pandora's box of problems that I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
Well, from a legal standpoint, this is and
we're not authorizing it as a school district to begin with. So
right.
You got people unilaterally doing different things. One coach isn't communicating that way. Another one is. Another person's doing this. Another person's doing that. We need something that's going to say, hey, look, all of you are going to apply, abide by the same rule, and that is either you're not going to do it or you are going to do it, and only under these conditions, or whatever it is. But, clearly we need something that's going to be universal in terms of how our staff is communicating with our students going forward. And my vote is, they shouldn't be communicating by phone.
Well, the other, to use your term, Frank, the other pink elephant in the room here is the whole Facebook thing.
Yeah.
The Facebook, I was just at a Safe Schools conference, and the things that go on between teachers and students, and even teachers and other teachers on Facebook, is getting them fired across the country. So I think this kind of policy, while it may be a first blush at it, is a direction we need to go.
You know, it's interesting to bring that up. I didn't bring it with me, but we get that school bulletin magazine as board members.
Correct.
The PASBA publication.
Yes.
One of them came, I don't know if it was last month or 3 months ago, it was talking about the whole bullying issue.
Right.
And
yeah, I remember that one.
They actually, and it wasn't my impression from our discussions about that issue back in February, March was, you can't control what happens outside of the school district, right? But this thing specifically said that the statute does allow you to address cyberbullying and things of that nature
Correct.
that are happening outside the school district. And so, I don't see any reason why we ought not to be reaching out into that space and at least putting a policy in place saying, we're not going to tolerate that kind of interaction out there, whether it's bullying or it's communication between staff and student on that point. It's just not appropriate.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine any reason why a teacher needs to be Facebooking a student or vice versa. Like, talk to them in class. Talk to them when you're on campus. I mean, it can't be something that pressing that you have to, engage in some sort of social networking conversation there.
Well, there is that, and that to me is the double-edged sword of social communicating or the social websites. I mean, it's got a lot of positives for people in their personal lives, but in the institutional setting, it's becoming a very, very gray and murky area. And
I mean, at the end of the day, you can interact with these people when you graduate. You know what I mean? But it shouldn't be happening in the summer. It shouldn't be happening, just outside of school hours and any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To whatever degree we can set up as many hurdles or barriers as possible, even if they don't stand up legally in a court challenge, at least we put it out there and say, this is grounds for dismissal or it's grounds for whatever, and then we can have the fight later. But
we need
it
to
may
protect
at
the
least
students.
be a deterrent going forward. People might say, hey, I may not want to spend my time and money and effort going through a legal challenge of this. I'm just not going to communicate to kids that way.
right.
It's not worth it.
I think the word is slowly starting to spread among the younger educators to stay away from this. But I'm just be honest with you, I was just at a conference a month ago where there's all kinds of examples of very, very inappropriate comments being made on Facebook by teachers about their students, about their colleagues, about their superintendent, about whoever. And they're getting fired. They're being called to task and they're being fired. Some people are raising First Amendment challenges and losing. Some are raising First Amendment challenges and winning.
I think this is the difference between private and public sector.
Absolutely.
In the private sector, you get fired in a heartbeat and nobody would say a word about it. In the public sector, it's, everyone's got their rights.
Well, that's the nature of the Constitution.
Not the Constitution. I think it's the nature of
Public bodies.
Government.
All right, so I would like to see two things inserted into this policy, and if the rest of the committee agrees. One, no social media communication, which would be Facebook, Twitter, all those types of sites. Then no telephone communication between student and staff. I think that is reasonable.
And no personal email communication. I think it's not that difficult to set up email account. I mean, every teacher here has a Boone account, right? Yeah. And quite frankly, kids should be able to be given a D-Boone account. I mean, there's only so many kids here that would actually have email, right? I mean, how many kids in the high school?
1,200.
That's not a big deal. Every student should have a D-Boone account. And the conversations that go back and forth between student and teacher should all be on a D-Boone account.
That's not a bad idea.
Way,
we can always go back.
Teachers don't have personal email addresses of students. They don't have any personal phone numbers of students. If you want to text somebody, well, you can just as easily send them an email to their D-Boone account as you can send a text to somebody. And the kids can have it forwarded to their cell phones or do a private email or something else.
But there's
just
a record.
We do as a board. But at least the forum then is it's through the school district. And quite frankly, all correspondence should have to be related to school district business, not on a personal level or any other basis. And at least then we're controlling that interface between student and teacher. And you can monitor it at any time. You can grab a handful of emails and just say, okay, well, let's just screen these things for inappropriate language. You can have a software program do it, for crying out loud.
I really like that idea, because if you give everybody a DBoon email address, like Mr. Basil said, it all goes through the district, and the district would have access if something inappropriate were to happen. Is that something that can be done technologically? I'm sure it can.
I will raise the question. I don't know.
Okay.
It still has to be in there that, personal email communications prohibited.
Well, I just have here no communication on social media with students, no texting, no phone contact, no emailing. Period.
All right. Just this might.
No emailing with personal.
Now, I know in the past we had students whose mother or father was a teacher in the district. Of course, they're an exception, but our policy says that teacher could be terminated if she has a cell phone number of her daughter.
Well, say that, or I thought it said with the exception of.
Does it?
Yeah.
I thought, okay, good. All right.
It does say that.
Says with the exception.
I remember reading that earlier now. Yeah. Yes, this policy does not apply to students who are family members of a district employee. All right. Never mind.
We can tweak that, and if you're ready for that as a start.
Yeah, I just think it needs a second look, a deeper dive, and I'll.
Well, these are actually. They're just starting to put these policies out now.
Yeah, I know. And to be honest with you, I read through it, but I didn't actually edit what I saw there. So I will, by the next time we have a meeting, I will go through that a little bit deeper and try to think of some language that's more appropriate. But
all right.
Page 2 of 3, Dr. Rado, just a typo there. Item number 5, get rid of the A in person.
Line? What line?
Line 24. 23 or 24. It says engaging in sexualized dialogue, whether in person,
in persona.
Yeah.
in persona.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be?
I don't know if it's supposed to read persona or person.
I think it would read person.
No, that might mean. Let me just double check that. That might be there for. Let me. You know what? Let me look at the policy that we plagiarized.
Engaging in sexualized dialogue.
We used as an example.
Well, the rest of it's not in Latin, so I don't know why that one word would be.
No, it is in person. Okay. That should be dropped. That's a typo.
All right.
We're not trying to be Latin scholars.
All right. Anything else on policies at 115? No, policy 829. Proposed policy 829. All right, then. So you're going to go back and do those changes.
Well, we'll do those changes, but I don't know if you want me to bring it forward until we take a longer look at it. But I
think you got to take a longer look at it.
But we have all summer. I mean, that's
probably 1 or 2 meetings. Though.
Right.
It's not. We're not here 30 days in July. We're here once maybe.
Right.
So.
Nope. I'll take it back and start working on it.
All right.
I'm just going to put more research. And we'll take the changes that you want to ramp it up, though, from what I'm hearing, to include those.
Do you have those things listed?
That's it. You can't. Yeah, I have them written.
All right.
No texting, emailing, basically no social media contact. Period. Yeah. And if we do say that, then we need to say what the consequences may be.
Termination.
This policy is specific to communication. Is
Correct.
There a policy for relations?
Well, that's
Code of Professional Conduct, which says
which should be policy.
There should be any of these kind of personal rules.
The state the code promulgated by the Department of Education and the professional. As a matter of fact, it's referenced on your policy. If you look, the Code of Professional Practice and Conduct for Educators. That's 22 PA code. Okay. So that's already in the school code.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, I mean, and
under above it, the Professional Educator Discipline Act. That's all the sanctions that can happen to somebody for those kind of relationships.
Right. It gets.
Okay, but those apply to educators. We just want to make sure that whatever's applying here is applying to all staff, whether you're a professional educator, or a certified educator, or you're just a custodian, or a coach, or a volunteer. I mean, we got to make sure we have that.
We would probably have to model that kind of policy for the non-professional staff.
Or if you had it in this policy, it applies to all staff in the school district, and we define staff to mean volunteers as well. So I think we're just making sure that.
I think that goes back to putting in a policy that mirrors the employee code of ethics only in policy form.
I understand that.
All right. Is that something else? Another policy? Then we're going to move on to agenda item 4, Administrative Regulation Development Policy 800.
Yeah, now we just passed this policy, but I wanted to this is really kind of an alert to let you know that, and the reason this says, I didn't email these to you. There are things written in this records management policy that would simply be too big to put in the policy itself.
What is this? This is litigation hold. What is...
Well, litigation hold is something that's covered under records management, where you have to, if you ever are under litigation or investigation or something, that you have to put a litigation hold on the records. This policy, this is an administrative reg, which is much more prescriptive than a policy. These are just things that we need to start to do. I'm not saying we're going to use the exact wording as Phoenixville, but there's a lot of duplication that school districts are engaging in to put these policies in place. We actually patterned our records retention or our records management policy with the one from Phoenixville. So I'm giving you examples of, I think there's 3 specific areas: the area of litigation hold, the actual area of records management, and then most importantly, and this is pretty much going to be a summer project, the records retention schedule that we don't have published yet, but one that we need to put in place. And that's a 6-page document, so we have to go through and decide based on applicable law, and we don't have anything like this in place yet. That's why I recommended that the board get started on passing.
Yeah, well, this is something I've been asking the board to do for 5 years now, because it came up that we had no space for our records, and that's when Bob Luchek was like, "Oh, we need to go and."
Iron Mountain.
Yeah, no. He was like, "Oh, we need to lease more space. It was going to cost the district, I forget what it was, $10,000 a year." I was like, "Well, wait a minute.
That's just when I came on board.
Let's go back and scan everything and then dump stuff that you don't need to be holding on to. Make room for stuff."
So at this point, I don't really need. I just wanted to make you aware that this is the direction that we're going to be going, and this is a bear of a project. So I just wanted to give you this as an example. It's probably going to look very similar to what you see here.
Well, I think actually putting together a retention schedule is going to be the easy part. Applying it to our current records is going to be the hard part.
Correct.
You have to make the open records officer. You have to have someone that's on that role.
Someone's going to have to go through and say, okay, we're going to take a look at, pick something here, accounts receivable, and the record retention is whatever the number is, 6 years or 3 years.
Right.
And so now someone's going to go through all our files, find all the AR boxes, and designate all these that are going to be destroyed. And then
It's going to be a bear.
That would be this same person that they reference to, the open records officer.
That is a state mandated position, right? The open records officer for the right to know.
You can name it. It's pretty much we would all have to pitch in and work on this. It's just somebody.
I don't think you do it all at once. You have to, start with
you have to parse it out,
thing at a time, and go through it. You're going to do payroll first, or you're going to do next thing next, and make sure you have all your permanent records in one place. And
But all of this came about, I think, with the increased emphasis on right to know and all of that stuff that's come about recently. I think a good school district needs to have this stuff in place.
Absolutely.
So, not that we're not a good school district because we don't have it, but we got to start somewhere.
Well, and the other part of this too is we discussed this was to the degree that you can go paperless and start retaining your records, even if it's something that's being produced as a paper, scanning it in,
right,
and then creating it on online, and storing it that way. It's a little bit more efficient to find things, and quite frankly, it takes up a heck of a lot less physical space, and that was at a premium here a little while ago, or at least we thought it was.
Right.
So,
but
it's a lot easier to hit the delete key too.
So my point is, this is going to be a project, and I just wanted to alert you to it. In terms of this committee, it's an outgrowth of what we've already passed. So now that we have this, we're obligated, I think, to do these things, which is why I wanted to get this on record that says, hey, you need to do these things. Because this, quite right now, is a little bit incomplete until you get these things in place.
Sure.
But it's the policy piece that says, here's the mandate to make sure we do this. So we'll move forward with this and start putting these things in place.
I'm glad to see it here finally. So
we'll scratch off the word Phoenixville, and we'll beg, borrow, and steal, and make it as much Daniel Boone as we can. I'll certainly have Mr. Supers review it. That's all I have on that. Just wanted you to be aware of it and that we're going to be moving forward.
All right.
That's what I call a July project, starting to get started on that.
So for the next meeting, we'd like to have, I want you to investigate the cardiac arrest issue.
Yep, I got that in my notes.
A heat policy.
It's in my notes.
All the changes to...
Add the process to membership.
Add process.
Refer that off to Mr. Subers.
Yep.
You
Then...
want to know what orientation coaches are receiving.
Yes.
Check on the athletic code of conduct. And you would like to see a copy of the Educator Code of Ethics.
Yes. And
actually, we might be able to show you. I might be able to send you a link online where you can look at that right away.
Okay, that's fine.
I can email it to you guys.
All right. And then under policy 116, we're going to change will to may.
Yep.
You can strike 5.9 on the second page.
Yep. And I'll check on that site from 1901.
And class sizes, you can put in there a minimum, and then the class size will be reported to the board on an annual basis.
And then for the staff-student communication, you're going to include no social media communication, no telephone communication, no personal email communication, and we want to start investigating giving students D-Boon email addresses for their use for school use.
Yep.
All right. And then for Brian Subers, you have to check with him with the process of removing a board member and the Title IX, potential Title IX issues associated with policy 115.
Correct.
All right. Then I guess we'll have any public comment.
I believe we want to talk about the bullying policy, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, do you anticipate reviewing 229 and 238?
229 and 238?
We are going to go through. We are systematically going through all policies. We just didn't get to the 200s yet. Is there something that you have a concern about?
Well, no, we had talked about diversity.
Okay.
And Walter was concerned or thought about what the language could be legally, and I had said I would look at other schools, and I pulled up Redding's, and I have a copy for everyone if you guys want to look at it and compare it to what we have.
Okay.
And we also talked about putting language in the student handbook, and there is language in there in the student handbook that the high school kids sign off on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have the copies.
No, we'll be glad to take, if you took that time.
Yeah,
we'll
the other
certainly
thing
look
I
at
thought was interesting was, I'm kicking myself for not bringing that article with me. I'll do it the next meeting. It talks about the accessibility of anti-bullying policies and whatnot, and how I think what's the woman's name that's on the committee with you? Sherry. She came to the last board meeting and spoke about the committee.
Mrs. Lacey?
Lacey.
Monica Lacey.
Yeah, and I think she had raised an issue. Well, we need more language talking or a separate policy about racial discrimination. And this article really talked about you don't really need that overlap because it tends to water down the issue of any kind of harassment or any kind of it doesn't matter whether it's race or it's sexual orientation or whatever. It's still the same kind of harassment. But they were talking about making sure that this thing was accessible everywhere, online, in the schools, posted, and so on and so forth. And I know we talked about posting, this stuff everywhere, and I just want to make sure we follow through with that and those things are up where they need to be.
Well, I had mentioned
We put that little thing.
Cover sexual orientation, the one that's posted to all the schools.
It didn't.
Well, I think that's because in our policy it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
It does in the policy? Because I think that came up.
I thought we added that.
Yeah,
But
Did it?
does.
Okay. Because I'm not sure. I know on the state level, I don't know if the state added that in yet.
Yeah, it does. All the schools have. Your policy has it too.
Minus that comment, that does the reason we put that. We borrowed that from Pottsgrove, and that tells people who they're supposed to call, and so I think we've met that. I don't know how much more we can do on that. We can certainly take a look at it.
Yeah.
But I was surprised when it does that Boone's did include sexual orientation, and it does. It includes your current policy.
Is that in the handbook or?
No, the policy.
no, it's in the policy.
Okay.
It's all Title IX stuff. Title 6, 7,
Because I think
9.
that's all even regulated by the state.
It's actually federal.
Yeah,
I think.
federal. So it's all listed, what we cover, what we don't.
But I think
we
the
cover everything.
cyberbullying policy, I just want to make sure that the 238 is a cyberbullying policy, and I just want to make sure that we actually reach out. I think we can actually reach out farther than what our current policy says. Based on what I read of that in that article, they actually quoted a section of the school code that allows you to say it's not just what you do while you're on campus or using
Right.
school equipment. It's anywhere.
Right.
And
If there's the legal term is if there's a nexus to the school, then you have, the long arm of the law reaches out, so to speak.
It is in the handbook.
Yeah, I know it's in the handbook. I just wasn't sure if it's in the policy, so thank you.
But just for your knowledge, the way we're proceeding through this committee is we're going through numerically, and then also anything that comes up beyond that that's urgent. So our intent is to continue to meander through the 100s, make changes accordingly. This is a lot of legwork, and handling more than about 10 of these at a time becomes very problematic.
I think you establishing the staff student communication policy should really be a priority.
Well, that's why you notice it's in the 800s.
I unfortunately we found at the AC found ourselves at the wrong end of that when one of our coaches was Facebooking minor children while he was also Facebooking his girlfriend. Need I say more?
Yeah, it's a dangerous and dark world out there.
Personal, inappropriate conversations with his new girlfriend, and these 10-year-old girls were reading.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, look at that thing. Did you see the Reading paper or today? Lady that got killed? Met the guy online. I mean,
we need to be very careful.
Yeah.
It's called in Delaware.
We need to be very careful about that stuff, and I'm glad the administration is taking a lead. And I hope that is something that could be streamlined.
It's a sign of the times. I mean, schools have to react to, what's being, the environment in which we live. And unfortunately, the environment today has a lot of concerns about the use of social media. That's just something we didn't have to deal with 10, 15 years ago. And it's a reality. Unfortunately, the genesis for our racial incident this year was
you got like multiples.
There's multiples of
social media.
I gave you my
Do you want your copy?
Yeah, I actually have a story to tell you then about.
Yeah, there's two different
Okay, well, we can-
policies, and then this is the student handbook, which I was surprised.
Thanks, Karen.
All right, yes, and Mr. Shaheen brought up at the last meeting some policies that the diversity committee wanted to bring forward to look at. I forgot my list of those at home.
Yeah, I actually don't. If I would have known, I could have brought that. I don't.
Is that something we still want to look at?
I have the diversity committee off on a side burner here while we're getting the school year finished.
All right.
That'll be back.
But yeah, we are going through, the goal of this committee is to go through every policy in the
I was
handbook.
looking because when Bobby, I went right away to look at the crisis intervention policy, and I was already surprised that it's from 1989.
Yeah, a lot of these policies haven't been changed in decades.
Well, it was my recommendation to the board after I started to look at the policy book. There's so many irons in the fire. I just said, we need to do this. This is long overdue. I knew we had the choice to, either bring in a private consultant and spend some money or just go through it on our own. And I think we made the determination that it would probably be good for everybody to just go through it on their own to learn. It's a way to learn about the district. I mean, policies are where it all happens. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very educational process for all involved.
Definitely.
Karen, that's all we need. Do you want to take an extra copy for Mrs.?
Yes, Mrs. Hamlin. She'll like that.
I mean, I'm sort of thinking about this. Harrisburg is always changing the law, and which then impacts what we're doing with our policies. To what degree is Subers or anybody at that office monitoring that and alerting us that, hey, there's a change in section whatever of the code, you guys need to modify your policy of this? Because I know with a lot of communities and stuff like that we manage, I mean, there's always changes in the law that impact how a condominium or a homeowners association is supposed to interact with its...
I can honestly say that I can't recall in the 4 years I've been here where I've had that conversation with our solicitor. I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I just think
recollection was with our contract with them is they're supposed to be helping us with this sort of thing.
Their assistance is as we go through policies to provide guidance for them.
We ought to push the language.
Well, that's
our interpretation of the language of the contract. Take a proactive approach that because they, quite frankly, Fox Rothschild sends me notices on a monthly basis about, this case was just settled, and this is how we feel it's going to be, it's going to impact case law regarding real estate transactions and so forth. Or Harrisburg is considering this law that's going to impact how you do X, Y, and Z. And I get those updates all the time. I can't believe we wouldn't have a school one that he could be bringing to a voting meeting once a month and saying, okay, well, look, you guys need to be aware of these 4 things.
Yeah, our student discipline policy hasn't been looked at since '96. I'm sure changes have been made at the state level since '96.
To be honest, I think PSBA, as much as I know your opinion, I think they do a real nice job with that.
But we as a board, you read. Sometimes I read the bulletin they send out. Sometimes I don't.
Right.
No, I'm not talking about the bulletin. They should have something that specifically goes to like the superintendent to say to answer that problem specifically.
Right.
I mean, I know they've got legal folks there. They told us before we can contact them if we have to.
I'm just saying, like, as a board, there's so many other things on our plate. There's so many other things on our plate that we just don't know. Well, this changed. And then 3 years go by, and you're like,
I'll just say it this way. Some people pay attention to policy, some don't. I do. That's why I brought this whole recommendation forward to have this committee. We need to be paying attention to policy. So, to the degree that we have our own internal watchdog system, yes. Would it be good for Fox Rothschild, and would it be good to have PSBA and look for alerts? It would be helpful. It certainly wouldn't hurt.
What somebody on the board or in the administration needs to be reaching out to or monitoring what's going on with PSBA or reaching out to Fox Rothschild on a monthly basis and just say, look, what changed? Or we need to set it up in a way that they're reaching out to us. So it's a push.
It's supposed to be a liaison between the school board members and the state, and that seems to be a pretty obvious role in their job to communicate to school board members what the state does, not just the other way around.
Well, if you look at the structure of our board, I think policy falls under, I think, legislative, and Mr. Shaheen currently now is our legislative contact.
Mr. I remember. I think it's on the. Let me check. It's on the board website. I believe Mr. Potts is the PASBO representative. I'm going to check that quick. Committees. It's on the committees page.
Sounds like he's going to get a new job.
I don't.
Yeah, PSBA. Scott Potts.
It wasn't me. So I was like, thank God. That happens when you're not in the room. Ask our treasurer.
We always used to say when I was a teacher, if you're not in the faculty room, we're talking about you. So I will make sure Mrs. Hamill gets that information.
All right, very good.
I have nothing else for the good of the order.
All right, nothing else? Anything from the committee? All right, then. We are adjourned at 8:16.